Give thanks to the Lord who is good, whose mercy endures forever.
Amen.
It is fitting that this morning's psalm is a psalm of thanksgiving for those on pilgrimage. The first three verses invite us to give thanks, and the second section can be directly related to our first reading this morning from Numbers. They abhorred all manner of food, and God delivered them from their distress. We too are on a pilgrimage of sort. We're at about the halfway point of Lent, somewhere between Remember You Are Dust and Christ is Risen. On this Sunday, traditionally, rose-colored vestments can be worn, a nod to centuries past when the Pope would give a golden rose to Catholic heads of state. Flowers are allowed back on the altar, and in some circles, visiting one's mother church or the church in which you were baptized was a common practice. Labyrinths, too, not only represented a union of art and design with a cosmological worldview, suggesting a greater harmony in the universe, but they were also used as a substitute for a pilgrimage to the Holy Land when travel was less safe and sometimes even dangerous. Today is a day when we are invited to pause and to look ahead. We look forward to what is to come, but as we all know, not every journey has a pause. So today, when we experience one, when we are allowed to take a breath, we should recognize it. Journeys, of course, can take many forms and often have no set end point. It can be a journey of 40 days, 40 months, or maybe 40 years. We're usually okay with a journey if we know there will be an ending. It allows us to settle in, to focus, and to anticipate what is coming. Those wandering in the desert in our first reading had no idea that their long journey was about to be over. Wandering in the vast wilderness where temptation runs rampant. They were promised milk and honey, but not yet. They too were in the in-between, just as much as we are today. With no end in sight, their memories became short, and they became forgetful. They were unhappy with the food, literal bread from heaven, manna. They wanted to go back to Egypt. They wanted cucumbers and leeks. Some even called Egypt the land of milk and honey. Their grumblings displeased God, and snakes, venomous snakes, lived among them, killing many. While preparing for today and reading that first lesson, my mind kept coming back to that great theological film from the 1980s. You know the one, and you've probably seen it. An archaeologist was looking for a particular artifact, and while one group was digging in one spot, this small group of outcasts were digging in yet another spot, and they uncover an opening. Dropping a torch into the abyss, it shines a light on what lurks hidden in the pitch black darkness. The main character, Indiana Jones, simply says, "Snakes. I hate snakes." Me too, Dr. Jones. Yet snakes in the ancient world were both a symbol of death and danger, as well as fertility and life and healing. God instructs Moses to fashion a bronze snake and place it on a pole so everyone that gazed upon it would live. This story is again recounted in our gospel passage today. And just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. Jesus is concluding his conversation with Nicodemus. Nicodemus was someone who wasn't trying to trap Jesus with his words or catch him in anything. He knows Jesus is a teacher, and he knows that he comes from God. Yet because of the way our lectionary works, we begin today's gospel passage with the word "and." We're right in the middle of something important. Nicodemus came to Jesus by night in his own time, and a few verses later, Jesus says that he is the light of the world. We're getting a glimpse of the light that is to come. The serpent raised on the pole so that all who see it may live is a parallel to Christ on the cross so that we all may live, so that we might all see light and be enlightened. We see that now, which is why an early name for the baptized in the church was the enlightened. Today we pause to see that glimmer of light that is to come. When Christ breaks free from the chains of death and rises to new life, we pause and we point to the light, proclaiming to everyone, especially those who will be baptized soon, that they and we are enlightened. We carry a great responsibility by living in the light of Christ. We're to be a community, to love our neighbor as ourselves. We are to care for one another. We can see this sense of community in the reading from Numbers. The Israelites said, "We have sinned," and Moses prayed for the people. Job even prayed on behalf of his friends. This year, for the entirety of Lent, we've listened to the covenantal history of Israel. We heard the story of Noah, Abraham and Sarah, the 10 Commandments, and today we hear that familiar verse, that familiar promise. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him may not perish, but may have life eternal. Yes, God loved the world, but the Greek used in this passage is cosmos. All that exists and all that has been or will be created. God's promise and God's love for the cosmos is to redeem it. This day of pause and regathering in the medieval church was to encourage the faithful to persist in their Lenten pilgrimage. Such encouragement is still helpful to pilgrims. It's helpful to us. We too are on the verge of entering the promised land. We too await the glorious resurrection. We mustn't tire of the bread that comes from heaven, because in fact, it will sustain us in our journey in this Lenten season. The Eucharist sustains us on our journey through the world. It is a source of strength and hope. The meagerness of the Eucharistic meal obviously won't satisfy our physical hunger, but it will make an impression on our souls. Not long ago, I was putting things up after a service, and I noticed that one of the patens, the plate that holds the bread during communion, gently but constantly used over the years, the bread that had been placed on the gold had left tiny scratches and impressions, barely visible. I found it to be a powerful metaphor of what this bread, prayed over in community, does to us, and the impression that it leaves on our souls that are sometimes ever so slightly hardened by the walls, by the world beyond those great doors. Yes, today we pause. We look towards the light on the horizon, and we persist. We do this because the journey to Easter is nearly over. And I invite you to come to the table, everyone, if you feel so drawn. Refresh and renew yourself, and let's journey together in the second half of Lent to the promise of light and resurrection that awaits us. Amen.